Let's bring in Marwan Bishara. He's our chief political analyst. He joins us on Skype from Doha. Welcome back to the News Hour, Marwan. At one point, Mr. Pence said, we've won the trade war against China. Factually and financially, that's not actually true, not 100% true for sure. So why is a VP candidate, the sitting vice president, why is he kind of indulging in half-truths at a time of such crucial change? And why is he viewing it as an inaccurate interpretation of foreign policy through the prism of trade policy?
Well, look, the question of China is probably the most important foreign policy challenge for the United States, not just for the Trump administration, for any administration moving forward. That's why a roadmap, a vision, a strategy of how to deal with China is probably the most indispensable issue facing any administration moving forward, because as we all know from history, from 1870 to today, there is nothing more destabilizing to the international system than a global power competing with a rising world power. And now China, a rising world power, wants to be an Asian power. To be an Asian power, it's probably going to have to confront the United States in the Asia-Pacific. That is a huge issue. To be reduced to a simple question of trade surplus really is a huge disservice to anyone who understands American interest and American standing in the world. And yet, it was reduced to a question of trade under the Trump administration, and clearly, as Kamala Harris has demonstrated with figures, that a lot of farmers and a lot of blue labor Americans have lost their jobs, have lost their livelihoods because of this random confrontational Trump approach to China, not really realizing that China is not some medium-sized country with no ambition, that China is there head-to-head with the United States.
They also clash directly over this specific issue, Marwan. Take a listen.
The vice president earlier referred to, as part of what he thinks is an accomplishment, the president's trade war with China. You lost that trade war. You lost it. What ended up happening is, because of a so-called trade war with China, America lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Farmers have experienced bankruptcy because of it. We are in a manufacturing recession because of it.
Why is it, Marwan, right now, over the past week or so, we're also hearing those Republican voices, those GOP supporter voices, who may not actually like or support Donald Trump? They're kind of saying Mr. Trump isn't foreign policy, but Mr. Trump is foreign policy because he has personally reset so many points of engagement around the world, be it China, the Middle East, his attitude towards countries in Africa, his attitude towards his personal, interpersonal working relationship with NATO leaders as well. He has changed those a lot.
This is one of the shortcomings of a businessman, a CEO, if you will, come statesman. President Trump has been boasting for decades now about his capacity to negotiate. He even wrote books, of course, helped by others, about how to negotiate. The whole bit for him is that I can sit with President Xi of China and I can convince him of various things. Of course, the Chinese don't work that way. They are statesmen. They are probably the longest duration empire in the history of humankind. They understand systems and they understand how to work in terms of a huge bureaucracy. So the idea that President Trump could simply convince President Xi was, of course, a non-starter. Not only that, there's something even more important. Personal relations don't work in such huge competitions, as I was saying, between a rising power and a global power. President Obama did a number of things. They're not perfect, they're not complete, they're not enough, but he did work out a number of free trade agreements with a number of countries surrounding China. He did pivot to Asia in the sense of sending more Navy power to the Asia-Pacific. And he engaged China on a number of issues, including human rights, Chinese responsibility around the world, trade, and so on and so forth. This was a system, or as Kamala Harris called it, there was a systematic approach of relations with China and with America's allies on the question of China. Trump, on the other hand, engaged China on trade, alienated the Europeans, who are America's most important ally for any strategy moving forward with China, alienated America's Asian allies, including Vietnam, Thailand, Japan, South Korea, and others that America badly needs in order to contain China economically. So what we ended up with, President Trump wanting to cancel everything Obama, keeping up only with some random personal relationship with Xi, calling him best friend, this and another thing. And of course, it all fell apart. And now America doesn't have much with which to confront, face, compete, or contain China.
Okay, final point, Marwan, please. Why is it, as we get closer to the election, November the 3rd, this White House seems to want to live in an alternate reality, be it COVID-19, Donald Trump putting out that video last night on Twitter, where he just looked and sounded peculiar. But whether it's COVID-19 in America, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's relationships between different countries across this region in the Middle East that spun as being something completely different to what it actually is when the UAE and Bahrain normalize relations with Israel, that spun as peace in our time. So Trump wants to live in this parallel pocket universe of something else.
Well, the truth of the matter is, and it's regrettable, is that this alternate world did work for Trump for some 3 years. From 2016, when he first entered the presidential elections, and through last year, it worked for him. The whole hoopla, circus, entertainment, politics as entertainment, personal relationships, every day, either allegedly lying about something or the other, deceiving in one way or another. It tended to work for him. And he actually was, for some point of time, relatively popular, certainly among his base. However, something happened earlier in the year, and that's the pandemic. You just cannot simply lie your way through the pandemic. Either you are ready, either you can manage it, you can work with the bureaucracy, you can work with science, you can work with the scientific community, you know how to calm the panic and project confidence that's not just personal about your next election, but also in terms of implementing those sober policies among Americans, whether it is testing, this and that and the other thing. Unfortunately, the pandemic test for this administration was a major fiasco. And since then, certainly since March, to my mind, the circus no longer worked, the entertainment no longer worked, the deception no longer worked. And hence, and that's what I called it recently in one of the pieces for Jazeera, is that I think, and here it has two meanings, if you will, the Trump administration has lost it. Lost it in the sense, it lost its mojo, if you will, but it also lost it in terms of commanding a popular support for 4 more years.
Its mojo contracted coronavirus, I think, Marwan. Marwan, good to talk to you as ever. A pleasure. Stay in touch. We'll talk to you soon.